This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Coming up on Dialogue Weekend, the 22nd meeting of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization wraps up in Uzbekistan. What was discussed, and how will this year's forum carry forward the Shanghai spirit? The International Atomic Agency shows concern over nuclear proliferation risks under the AUKUS deal. What did the report say, and what impact could the group bring to the Asia-Pacific region and the world? Now, on Dialogue Weekend.
Hello and welcome to Dialogue Weekend. I'm Xu Qinduo. For the first time since the outbreak of the pandemic in 2020, the leaders of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization have met in person and held face-to-face discussions at this week's summit in Uzbekistan. What topped the agenda at the summit? What role does the group play in maintaining peace and stability in Central Asia? And why are more and more Asian countries showing eagerness to join this group? To find out more, I'm glad to be joined by Anna Tangen, current affairs commentator, He Wenping, senior research fellow of the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, and Gambar Nadari, columnist with Kaihan International. Okay, welcome to the discussion. Wenping, I will start with you. Obviously, it is a very important gathering. Leaders, now they appeared in person and held a face-to-face discussion over more than 2 years. So tell us, why is the summit so significant?
Well, as you just put forward, significance of this summit is because now the leaders come together and meet, person to person to discuss all those issues and matters with this SCO. This is number one, of course, which means now we have this confidence for fighting back this COVID-19. And secondly, also given this background, the biggest background is not only COVID-19, it's also from that Ukraine, Russian this conflict, this war, still going on. And also those sanctions on Russia even goes to President Putin himself also remain there. But now Putin joined this platform, come out, and then even talking with many leaders, and even this SCO not only saying limited its fear, is going to expand it and getting a new member like Iran. We also know the Iran, what kind of position and image in the eyes of the Western countries. So I think all those things, if you put those elements together, of course, it's catch those eyes at all on what's going on about SCO. But anyway, SCO itself has been in the process of developing itself. Mm-hmm. It not only needs to tackle those challenges about this war in Ukraine, it also needs to find out what is the direction for connectivity of their economic issue, how to develop further those economic performance under those threats for the financial crisis, food crisis, and the fuel crisis.
Well, the Eurasian integration and trade must go on. These countries cannot wait for the West to come to its senses to realize that the way forward is cooperation, integration, trade, trust, mutual trust, and of course, when it comes to security and peace across the region and beyond. Yes, we have problems in the West with regard to the rising prices of goods and services. We also have the problem of the energy crisis, but that hasn't stopped the Eurasian countries from getting back together after the COVID-19 in order to find proper solutions for the problems, and the problems that have also affected the Western Hemisphere. So it is good news. The Eurasian integration is pretty much underway. I am positive that there will be more members in the coming years and decades, and that the Eurasian integration will mean only one thing: the SCO is here to stay. The SCO is going to counterbalance the trade with the West. The SCO is also going to help promote and sustain development, security, and of course integration in this strategic region.
Well, Anna, obviously one of the highlights of the summit is a meeting between President Xi Jinping and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin. Both leaders spoke briefly in front of the press. What is the message you read from their speeches, remarks there?
Well, the most telling message was one Putin gave himself when he talked about Xi Jinping's concerns over the Ukraine situation. And he thanked China for being balanced in its approach. So that was the main message there. I mean, there are a lot of people and narratives going on in the West about how China is now full frontal backing, Russia, all this kind of nonsense. But in reality, the truth has been exposed. China has never been comfortable with the situation in Ukraine, but nor were they comfortable, and they do support Russia in the sense that every country is entitled to territorial security. And they know full well, with the situation in Taiwan, what Russia is going through in terms of Ukraine.
Wenping, what does that say, when President Putin says basically that we understand your questions and concerns about this? During today's meeting, we will, of course, explain our position on the issue, although we have talked about this before. I mean, what does that say about the Chinese position on the Ukraine conflict?
I think Putin now make it clear. He respects China's position, which means, he understands China's concern. Now our concern is we respect the UN Charter. We also respect all those principles. Also we respect Russia's their own security concern. Like Nate was saying, you need to understand all those issues, why, and from where it comes from. Like NATO, this expansion of NATO, also becoming the concern of Russia's. This is Russia's core interest. I think President Putin also mentioned he respects China's this core interests. Refers to Taiwan issue. Now the Taiwan card has been played around by the U.S. Even recently, just the same time, the U.S. The Senate, there is a Foreign Affairs Committee, even passed Taiwan some kind of those law, this proposal. Furthermore, push China, I think, to another corner because they back up fully to this Taiwan. Increase Taiwan's this status, and even trying to expand this diplomatic room for Taiwan. Of course, this is a core interest of China. I think those statements coming from either a Chinese president or Russian president saying mutually respect each other's this core interests tells the true picture there.
Well, Gambar, the West has been talking about Russia being isolated, under sanctions, and also decoupling efforts from the European countries, from the U.S. But the presence of Putin, or attendance, in this very important meeting itself shows that Russia probably, all the efforts to isolate Russia has, to some extent, failed.
Well, sanctions never work. They have never worked throughout history. You cannot isolate or sanction Russia because all countries have integrated trade mechanisms with each other. Russia is a major exporter of oil and gas to the European continent and, of course, Asia. Russia can easily switch to its national currency to get paid for the gas and oil that it exports to the Asian countries. So you cannot isolate Russia. It has failed. The sanctions regime policy is a self-defeating mechanism imposed by the West upon the West. I mean, the people of living in places like London, Paris, or Amsterdam and Berlin are the ones that are paying the heavy cost of Western sanctions against Russia. The rising prices of foods and services are the outcome and the final outcome of the sanctions regime against Russia. China is working with Russia. The SCO countries are working with Russia. Why? Because they need Russia, and Russia needs these countries. You cannot block trade in the 21st century. You cannot sanction a major exporter of oil and gas in the 21st century. Yes, we know that the de-dollarization process is also pretty much underway. Many countries are trading in their own national currencies. You cannot isolate these people and these countries anymore. Yes, it might have worked a century ago, but not anymore. This is a self-defeating policy that the West is imposing on itself. And I'm afraid the people in the West are the ones that are paying the heavy costs. People are suffering. We have problem with unemployment. We have problem with rising costs of energy and food prices. We have serious problem with travel and tourism, all because some big heads in the West have come to the conclusion that they can isolate Russia like the 20th century. That is not working. That hasn't worked, and it will never work. Remember, this is just the beginning of a heavy loss for the Western Hemisphere with regard to sanctions against Russia. We should expect more negative impacts in the coming weeks and months.
Well, pick up on what Gambar has said earlier, that the Eurasian integration, but we do see probably Russia, because of the sanctions, the decoupling efforts, Russia is, I would say, shifting in a firm way to Asian countries. You do see like a closer probably trade relationship or investment relationship with Asian countries, or the energy market more important to Russia. For example, India, China, Indonesia is thinking of the option for purchasing oil and gas from Russia too.
Yeah, I mean, there's a cultural pull and tie to, obviously, to Europe. And that was Putin's original idea. I mean, he literally got up in front of the Bundestag and said, look, we're looking forward to our European home. They identify as European. But it just hasn't worked out that way. They've been rejected by Europe time and time again, partly at the urging of the United States. And now they find themselves economically, at least, tied to the East. The question is, how do they get comfortable with a kind of new modality, an understanding of the Eastern areas? Now they have some of it. Obviously, they were very much involved in the stands and things like this. But it's going to require some time in order to make that full adjustment.
Well, Wenping, another issue we are seeing, like many Asian countries are lining up to join SCO. You have Egypt, Qatar, and other countries are becoming a dialogue partner of ICO, and other countries like Maldives, I think it's Bahrain, to become the partner of SCO, etc. So, what makes SCO seem so, I would say, attractive to countries in Asia? Why are those countries so interested to be part of SCO?
Yes, we have seen this attractiveness. I think mainly coming from two areas. One is SCO, given those 20 years past, they have accumulated very rich those experiences for maintaining like peace and stability like around those borders. From the very beginning, SCO is aimed to tackle those three kinds of forces: separatist forces, extremist forces, and also those terrorist forces. So given those times, those sharing intelligence information, like joint military drills, have all played a very fundamental role to maintain the peace and security. Secondly, is they want to join like this economic cooperation, this circle. Nowadays, this development circle is getting bigger and bigger, this cake, development cake, cooperation cake. So other countries, like those partner country, dialogue partner country, or observing country, they all see clearly this development pie now is getting bigger. Now, in order to get rid of those challenges coming from COVID-19 and the Ukraine crisis, you need to team up rather than saying de-link or decouple. You have to team up with a big market, with big those investors like China now serving as this the biggest push force in all kinds of those arena. So I think those basic two mirroring those attractive things can play attractiveness for other countries to join.
All right. Thank you, Wenping. Thank you for your time and insight. Let's move on. Recently, China has urged the chief of the International Atomic Energy Agency to address global concerns over the AUKUS nuclear proliferation endorsement. So how worried should we be about the AUKUS pact and its impact on peace and stability in the Asia-Pacific region? To find out more, I'm glad to be joined by Dr. Zhao Hai, Research Fellow of Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, together with Anna Tangen and Gambar Nandari. Welcome to the discussion. Anna, we'll start with you. AUKUS, the pact was created a year ago. Of course, it obviously largely has been shrouded with the secrecy, in particular at the very beginning, even the French, in particular for the French, right? Yeah. And nobody knows what happened. So what has the pact progressed over the past year?
Zero progress. Basically, Australia says they need nuclear submarines right away, but there's nowhere to get them. Neither the U.S. nor Britain is willing to give them existing ones. They're behind in their production schedule as it is. There's this desire to have a, quote, interim sub. The question is that was supposed to be the Barracuda, the one that they threw over the French one. Mm-hmm. So everything had been gearing up to make those. They had set up a shipyard so that it could cooperate with that. There's a big supply chain that goes into all of this stuff. So at this juncture, they're no closer to where they want to be right now. At best guess, 2040 is when they would have the first delivery of either Virginia-class subs that they buy from the U.S. or the British version thereof.
Yeah, from the UK. So still some time away. But Dr. Zhao Hai, the pact is controversial. Part of the reason is really about we are talking about the nuclear submarine. It's about the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. If you look at the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, for example, Article 1 requires nuclear powers not to transfer nuclear weapons or devices to a recipient, or not to assist any non-nuclear powers to basically acquire these nuclear weapons, nuclear technology over there. But obviously, AUKUS, the pact, seems to be the step in the wrong direction.
Exactly. I think, first of all, there are countries in the world that are greatly concerned about the development of AUKUS, particularly focused on the nuclear submarine. Australia's neighbor, New Zealand, is the #1 country that are concerned about the development and already said that they forbid the nuclear submarine to enter their maritime area. And therefore, other countries are following up. For instance, ASEAN countries, they have the no nuclear weapon free zone. So that treaty should be upheld, and actually Australia observed that treaty. And therefore, I think ASEAN countries in Southeast Asia are very much concerned with that too. And also other neighboring countries, including China and many other neighboring countries in the Indo-Pacific area, are worried about the development of that nuclear technology transferred from the United States or UK to Australia. Because there are history in Australia in pursuit of nuclear weapons, even though they failed and ultimately gave that up. However, that history stated that given that background, acquiring nuclear technology, very sensitive nuclear technology, as well as acquiring highly enriched nuclear materials transferred to Australia is a very dangerous process, and it might endanger the surrounding areas as far as the coastal area of China.
Mm-hmm. Well, Gambar, if you look at the way big Western powers like say the UK, the US, or the European Union, the way they treat the AUKUS issue or the way they treat Iran nuclear issue, it seems like the attitude is pretty different.
Well, that's all about fear-mongering and double standards, because Iran is not an ally of the United States. So it's so easy for them to pressure Iran, to impose sanctions on Iran, and also walk out of any nuclear deal that they might sign with Iran in the coming weeks, if not months or years. I think what is happening in the Asia-Pacific region is baseless. It is fear-mongering of China's non-existent threat. China has never ever invaded or threatened to invade any country in the region for so many decades. It's in fact one of the biggest victims of the foreign invasion over the past century. So what is based on weaponization of Australia is totally beyond facts and evidence. I don't think that America needs to weaponize Australia. Why not just build a base there? America has hundreds of bases everywhere. Just have your own base in Australia with nuclear weapons too. You don't need to weaponize another country in order to threaten and destabilize the entire region. I think this is totally out of proportion, and there is a much better way of dialogue with the regional countries, especially China.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Gambar mentioned an interesting point here. Of course, it's about the role of Australia as a regional country here. China is the largest customer, largest destination for their exports for a variety of products. But because of the differences, I would say ideological differences, when people stress about that, then there's a difference over there. And then, the people care a lot about that. There's a talk about outline attitudes, policy toward China. So Australia is, in terms of military strategy, is tied in with the U.S. strategy to contain China. And inside Australia, there's such a discussion. They say this is dangerous and provocative. Australia could be engaged or involved directly in the worst scenario, for example, a military conflict between China and the U.S., or in another worst scenario, like the U.S. withdraw from this region, Australia feel like we are left dry. So it's kind of an awkward situation.
Well, it is awkward. I mean, Australia is going to be spending a lot of money on all of this military equipment. What are they going to do? Are they going to invade China? Do they really think that China wants to invade Australia? I mean, it's just, it doesn't make any sense. This is all hyped up fear-mongering that's going on. And quite frankly, this submarine thing is nonsense. By the time they're delivered, at the earliest, 2040, the submarines will be obsolete. Already China, other countries are developing these hypersonic weapons that can be delivered in less than an hour. They fly at very low altitudes. At this juncture, they're impossible to stop. So this idea that you need this secondary strike, retaliatory strike capability of the submarines that can hide somewhere and then pop up and shoot their nuclear missiles at another country, to punish them for attacking them is nonsense. The fact is, everything's moving towards drones, including submersible drones. For the price of just one of these behemoths, you would have 100,000 drones combing the waters, basically making sure that no submarine could go undetected. So, what they're really talking about here are dinosaurs. Now, in terms of the nuclear, let us be clear. These are nuclear-powered submarines. The danger is that, especially with the U.S. Virginia-class submarines, they could become a nuclear power in a matter of hours because the bays themselves are made to handle nuclear cruise missiles and ballistic missiles. So all they have to do is make a stop at Guam, and all of a sudden, they're a nuclear power. And this plays into not just what's going on with Australia, but remember, now you have the DPRK. They have their own, they've declared that they are a nuclear power. How soon before South Korea, which the majority of people say that they want to have their own nukes, and Japan, who would have a reason to have their own nukes because then they would be independent. They could send the 53,000 troops who many see as occupying their soil and who have been there since the defeat of Japan. They could send them home. They could be their own country. They could resurrect their own economic plan and depart from the Plaza Accord, which has seen them move sideways for these many years. So you have a very, very delicate balance. The U.S. is tinkering with this thinking that they're going to suppress China. In actuality, they're causing a tremendous amount of harm, potentially creating a nuclear-armed nuclear powers throughout Southeast Asia.
But obviously that's a threat, let's say, to the regional peace and stability. Dr. Zhao Hai, obviously, as you mentioned earlier, some countries have expressed the concern, and one country standing out is Indonesia, which is actually a neighbor of Australia, regional power. They expressed this, they said they are uneasy about the pact, about the development, because that could be, say, set off arms race. As Anna mentioned, other countries would say, we want the same nuclear device to protect ourselves. And then what can you do?
Well, just follow up with what Einar said. Something interesting that is, or actually poisonous, that is happening in the political and also media in Australia. Because right now, according to the latest poll, there are people, up to 9% of Australians really believe that China is about to launch attack to Australia, and therefore they need to defend themselves. That's the legacy of the previous administration, actually previous 2 or 3 administrations in Australia. People like former Prime Minister Morrison or former Defense Minister Peter Dutton, they're setting up this fantasy that China is the threat, actually a security threat to Australia and its homeland. And that's ridiculous. However, they're following this logic and trying to use this to persuade Australian people to support this fantasy plan of building up to 8 nuclear propelled submarines to actually threaten China. And the consequences, like you said, the neighboring countries, the immediate neighbor like Indonesia, and also many other Pacific Island countries, they have suffered the nuclear experiment by the United States in previous decades. And now they will suffer another potential nuclear competition arms race in this region again. So I think their concern is really validate, and the IAEA should pick up their concern and really considering using their rules to sanction and to try to persuade AUKUS not to pursue this nuclear submarine down the road.
Yeah, speak of the IAEA, Zhao, China has expressed the concern about the report by IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency. Basically, in their report, they said they are satisfied with the way the 3 countries are handling the issue, or they are fine, comfortable with the level of engagement with the 3 countries, without mentioning the concern of countries we mentioned, for example, Indonesia, New Zealand, China, and international activists. They are talking about creating a precedent, with this AUKUS pact over there. So why? I mean, IAEA, their responsibility is stopping the spread of nuclear weapons and nuclear technology over there. But somehow it seems like with this lopsided report, what's behind that?
I think on this particular issue, IAEA has been used as a tool by the United States and to some extent by UK and Australia. They are actually trying to show that they only will build a nuclear propelled submarine. However, there won't be any nuclear weapons installed on those submarines. And therefore, that transfer technology does not constitute a violation of the rules of IAEA. However, that's clearly a double standard because this is a clear military technology, not a civilian technology. Even country like Iran developing a civilian technology will be sanctioned and by the United States and then examined by IAEA. Then why not this very clear military use of technology being sanctioned as well? So I think this is clearly a double standard and shouldn't be accepted by the global community and should be re-examined, reviewed, and closely monitored the steps taken by US and UK transferring those technology. So far, from what I heard, again, I mean, Australia understand this problem and they're trying to say that they're going to develop their own nuclear facility on the Australian homeland and not to actually move a nuclear propeller from the United States to Australia. However, that alone does not satisfy because Australia itself does not possess those technology. Ultimately, they need to get those technology from UK and United States. And I think that alone is very much a concern of the neighboring countries.
Well, on that note, we conclude today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also find us on the CGTN app on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.